After watching countless auditions on Zoom and self-tape, I've come to the realization that most actors are giving a performance. What I mean is, many times I want to just simply say to the actor, it's not a performance, it's a conversation. Just talk. I guess the question you might have now is just how do you do that? In this episode of Casting Actors Cast, I will break down the process so you can stop performing and start conversing with your acting.
It's time for another episode of Casting Actors Cast. Here he is, your host, Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Casting Actors Cast. How are you? I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. I'm a casting director with McCorkle Casting in New York. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this cool episode, I think. It really is about not thinking in terms of being a performance when you audition or when actually you are on the job. It's really much more about thinking in conversational terms, and we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about exactly how you do that in this episode. But first, this is that moment of the podcast where I get to say, hey, thank you so much for tuning in to Casting Actors Cast. If you're relatively new to Casting Actors Cast, I'm so excited that you're here. Please stay with us. This is a community of like-minded individuals, actors who are interested in being more comfortable and more confident with their auditions. I am giving acting tips, business advice, all kinds of cool stuff happening on this podcast. So I invite you to listen to all of the episodes if you can. You can binge on them. Why not? It's like, what else are you going to do? But for those of you who are regular listeners to Casting Actors Cast, I could not be more grateful. Thousands and thousands of downloads every week of the podcast, and it means so very much to me. So listen, you can go to the website, castingactorscast.com. That's castingactorscast, all one word.com. And there's a form that says dive into the talent pool. Why don't you just dive in with the rest of those actors who've chosen to do so? There's a form. You just fill it out. You give me your name and your email address. I don't do anything with that information, by the way. But what will happen is, as a thank you, it opens up some freebies for you. One is a book that I wrote called Conversation Pieces Out of the Studio, the voiceover workshop for professional actors. It's a 100-page PDF that you can download, you can read on your device, you could print it out if you want to, or you could go to Amazon and pay the $15 it costs to have the actual copy of it. Either way, I think you're going to find it really useful, especially if you have some interest in doing voiceover work. It really is based on the voiceover workshops I've conducted over many, many years. Put it together in book form, and that's why I'm giving it to you free of charge just for signing in, just for saying, hey, I'm jumping into the talent pool. All right, the next thing that's available that's free is it's a video. It's a private video called Casting Secrets, What They Don't Want You to Know. But I'm going to tell you in this free 20-minute video. Also on the website is a place called Jeff's Jots. It's a blog, but the blog is based on every episode that I release. So you can have a printable PDF of the entire episode. So it's giving you all the, here's a good word, salient points. Come on now. That's the first time you heard that, right? Come on. How many times have you heard the word salient? Okay. Anyway, so you can get that Jeff's Jots. A lot of actors have been telling me that they print that out and they actually put it on their bulletin board for that week. They're using it as sort of a way to stay focused on the next right thing for them and their career. So I'm very touched by that as well. You've heard a lot of really cool episodes recently, and I'm going to continue to do so. But if you have any ideas, if you have some ideas about future episodes, if you want to submit a self-tape for evaluation live on the air, you can do that not only in that place that says dive into the talent pool. There's a place you can ask some questions, but also the email address is really easy to get in touch with me, and that is castingactorscast@gmail.com. So feel free to do that. So I think that's everything that I've covered in this today. Here's a shout out to my good friends at Actors Connection. Guess what? All of their classes are online. Yeah, you can take all kinds of workshops, intensives, all from industry professionals. So hello to my friends at Actors Connection. You got to check them out. So let's talk about the problems and the solutions of being conversational versus being a performance. Too many times I see actors thinking in terms of performance, and that has to do with just conditioning. I remember in my acting days, now this is going back a long time, but I think it still might be helpful. The rules kind of still apply. And that was, I did this farce. It was a modern farce called Nurse Jane Goes to Hawaii. And it starred the late great Georgia Engel. And Georgia was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show for many, many years, but she was just a lovely person and a wonderful actress. And I was playing Peter Pryor in this farce, in this comedy. And we had an opening night, and it opened, the world premiere was at the, Pennsylvania Stage Company. And it was really exciting. It was really fun to be a world premiere of a new play. And I thought the performance was really great. A lot of really good people in the cast, and it was a lot of fun. And the next day, I got a call from the artistic director of the theater. Now, the artistic director was not directing the play, but it was his theater. So he said, I'd like to have a meeting with you. And I was like, oh, great, sure. And I came in, and he sat with me for about an hour. And it took me a long time to understand what he was trying to get at. And what he was talking about is that he felt that my performance was being too presentational, that I was just showing the character rather than being the character. And I was a little bit confused by that, because this farce was directed by Sue Lawless. And, it wasn't kind of a subtle thing. It was kind of like a broad comedy where my character was kind of out there. But it was really interesting to me that his perception was that if I had just gotten more internalized with the character, he thought that would have been a better choice. Well, okay. I understood what he was saying, and I left the meeting going, I'm not going to change anything. And I didn't. And happily, that play did extraordinarily well, and it was picked up. We also brought it to New York, and that was kind of fun as well. So I'm not trying to diss this artistic director. I'm just saying it's really interesting to me that everyone has a slightly different perspective on what they see, what they perceive in terms of a performance. But now, all these years later, here I am looking at these self-tapes, looking at these Zoom auditions, and I feel a lot like that artistic director, because I just want to say, sometimes I'm seeing the actors acting, and what I want to see is a character in a circumstance. So the problem and the solution is what we need to talk about. The problem, as I see it, is giving a performance in a lot of roles that you might be auditioning for or that you're cast in, where the solution is really about just shifting into having a much more natural conversation. And the problem is that it feels external and it doesn't feel organic. It feels like it's outside of yourself, when the solution is that you're simply there to tell the truth. The problem is that it provides less information when you are when you're in a performance. It provides less information about who you are, about you. So it denies those connections that you are personally making with the character that can make the entire performance feel truthful. It provides less information about the uniqueness of who you are. That's the problem. The solution is that it exposes your natural reaction to circumstances when I see you connected to the character. The problem is that it exposes the inherent difficulty with the technology. When we're doing Zoom auditions, when we are on camera, and we are not completely immersed with the other character that is in the room with us, simply because there's no other person in the room with us, and we have to try to be really truthful about that. What I see is the actor just relying on their stagecraft But you know what? The stagecraft doesn't always work. It doesn't keep us interested because you are not focused and concentrating on that other in the scene. And so when you're able to shift your focus, when you're able to provide a conversation and really project the person that's there in the room with you, it keeps us interested and it keeps us empathetic to you and your choices. All right, so here are some ways to prepare for the conversational acting style that I think is missing in a lot of auditions. One, it's important that you learn the script. You learn the scene, but you learn it in your own words. Here's what I mean by that. Many times when we're working on a script, we're hearing it filtered through what we think are character choices. That's not as helpful as you're reconditioning yourself. For when you're working on a script, when you're working on a scene, hear it as your own voice first. Don't think character. Think that it's you in this situation. Why? Because naturally you're going to make human connections. You're going to make connections that relate to your own life experience. It's not an external manifestation of what's taking place in the scene. It's something that you are feeling truthful about because you're putting it in your own words. I hope that makes sense. Number 2, place the other character in closer proximity to where you are. Now, just because you're doing a Zoom audition or just because you're doing a self-tape doesn't mean that that person that you're having that conversation is just one handful away from you. Literally this close. For those of you who are listening, you can't see it. I'm like 18 inches away from my face. The idea is to placing that other character that's in your scene a little bit closer to you really does put you in a place where you are having the conversation and you don't feel like you have to project. You don't feel like you have to come across and fill the space necessarily. So keeping the significant other closer to you in closer proximity really makes for some dynamic choices that then become available to you as a result. Like I alluded to earlier, you need to draw on your personal experiences first. That's the default setting anytime you're working on an audition or anytime you're working on a script. It is then that you want to layer in some of those character choices. Acting is behaving. I've said that many, many times. How would you behave? That's the starting place. That's the foundational place for your work when you're learning a new scene or when you're working on a new script. So here are some ways to perform using conversational methods. So these are the right way to approach the conversational method of working. 1, like I said, you keep the other person right in front of you. Number 2, the camera does not exist. This happens so often in self-tape or in Zoom. There's this different weird energy that I get from the actor because they know the camera is there and they're so aware of the camera's presence. But it goes beyond that sometimes. Sometimes I get the feeling that the actor is being self-conscious about being judged, as if the camera is making some kind of a judgment about you. Guess what? The camera is not there to judge you. The camera is an inanimate object. It doesn't really belong in your scene. It just happens to be there. So be careful about giving that camera too much weight, too much value. Don't make it so important that it distracts you from being able to concentrate in the scene and in the work. Number 3, process and react to the information in a logical way. Be careful not to force things while you are acting in a conversational way. It doesn't make any sense for you to be illogical unless you're playing a character that's illogical. Of course, then that's the writing. That's what you have to play. But what I'm talking about is sometimes I just see these very strange, unnatural elements to the character that kind of doesn't make sense. And I'm not sure where that comes from. but it feels many times forced. It feels not really connected. It feels like it's an external part of your process. And that takes me out of really investing and wanting to invest in you. So here are some ways that can help you be more conversational. One is that your natural speaking, that you don't have to feel like you need to be more quiet. Just your natural speaking voice is going to be effective. I've seen actors say, well, it's on camera, so you have to be quieter. You have to bring it down. You have to do less. All of that is wrong, in my opinion. Just simply using your natural speaking voice. Don't force yourself to be quiet. Don't think you have to hit the back row by being too loud either. Being relaxed and natural, using your own speaking voice. Sometimes you see actors when they're on camera, they restrict their physical movement. So number 2, when I see that restriction of the physical movement, like don't blink or don't move or keep your head still, or I don't know what some of these teachers are teaching out there, but please remember that you are a human being. You need to react naturally and honestly as if it were you in this circumstance playing this situation. So be careful about restricting your physicality. Natural, comfortable physicality, movement is part of the self-expression and part of the uniqueness that is you. I also see actors, this is number 3, of being very self-conscious with themselves. You can tell that they're watching themselves and they're listening to themselves, always evaluating, always judging what they're doing. Boy, that's a painful situation because the investment needs to be in the moment and not in the self. So staying focused on the situation, staying focused on trying to figure out the other character, that's where the energy needs to be placed. Number 4, I see actors overthinking things. They're overthinking everything, things to do. Overthinking meaning that every movement, every nuance of what they're doing has some level of control to it. And when I see that, I just simply get uncomfortable. So be careful about overthinking. It's a moment in time. I've said this many times. So just play the moment, play the situation, play the character. Don't show me the character, be the character. So here are some things to do while you are conversational acting. Remember that the scene is not about you. I know, shocker, right? But it's absolutely true. If every audition you made the scene about the other, you're trying to figure the other out. You're trying to understand why that other is acting that way. You're trying to get inside that other person's head. It really is an amazing way that it deflects that energy from you and your own self-conscious talk into the other. That makes your acting so much more natural, so much more interesting. So just simply remember the scene is not about you. Now, next, make sure you are responding in a natural way. The minute you watch your reaction, the minute that is not a real reaction. So react in a natural way, meaning how would you react in the situation? And then layer the character's choice in terms of reaction. But start with a foundation that is you when you respond in a natural way. Number 3, keep your gears in check. What do I mean by gears? I've said this before in several podcasts, but your gears meaning when you go from one thought to another in an audition or in a scene, remember, vary the pitch, vary your pace. Give me a pause. Do natural choices that reflect you in that situation in a natural way. Pitch, pace, pause. Those are all things that are really helpful, what I call gear changes. When you have an idea about those gear changes, and gear changes simply mean when you go from one emotional place or one literal place to another, simply adjusting the pitch of your voice, simply playing around with the pacing of your character, deciding that there's a pause needed here because you need to be contemplative. Ooh, good word. You need to think about what you're saying. All of those are really helpful external devices that can help you bring it into a more naturalistic conversational way. Wow. That's a lot of stuff. I know. You might want to listen to this podcast a couple of times. I've got a lot of information, and I hope that I've made sense. I hope I've taken you on an interesting journey in this podcast. There is a lot of information here. I guess if I were to sum up this podcast, it's remember anytime you're doing a Zoom audition, anytime you're doing a self-tape, it really is about letting me see you. Letting me see you as the character. Letting me see you as the character in this situation. So that logical, natural progression. And as long as there's truthfulness in the fact that you're connecting to that significant other in the scene, as long as there's truthfulness in the way you approach the character, you are not showing me. You are actually the character. That is more compelling, more interesting, and I promise you, is going to get you the callback. It's going to book you the gig. I promise. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach, and this is Casting Actors Cast.
Thank you for joining Casting Actors Cast. Please don't forget to review, like, and share Casting Actors Cast wherever you get your podcast videos. Thanks. I'm Megan Grace Martinez.